My name is Clara, I'm 38 years old, and my own family tried to steal my house from right under me. Before I tell you about the absolute chaos that erupted when I revealed my one final secret, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It all started on a Sunday, the kind of deceptively beautiful autumn afternoon in Naperville, Illinois, where the air is crisp and the leaves are turning to gold. Sundays were family dinner days. Usually, that meant a casual pot roast and my dad watching football in the living room. But the moment I walked through my parents' front door, I knew something was wrong. A tight knot formed in my stomach. It wasn't one thing, it was everything. It was the good china, the one my mother, Helen, only used for Christmas and Thanksgiving, gleaming on the dining room table. It was the crystal wine glasses, sparkling under the chandelier. And it was the bottle of expensive champagne chilling in a silver bucket, a brand my father, Richard, only bought for major celebrations. But the real tell, the thing that made my blood run cold, was the seating arrangement. My father was at one end of the table, as usual. But at the other end, in the seat of honor that was usually my mother's, sat my little sister, Chloe. She was beaming, looking around the table like a queen surveying her court. My mother was seated to her right, fussing over her like she'd just won the Nobel Prize. I took my seat and forced a smile. "What's the special occasion?" My father let out a booming laugh. "Patience, Clara. All in good time." We went through the motions of passing the food, the silence thick with unspoken words. I could feel their eyes on me, 3 sets of them, all waiting. Finally, as my dad popped the cork on the champagne with a theatrical flair, my mother cleared her throat. "Clara, honey," she began, her voice dripping with practiced sweetness. "We've all been talking, and we've come up with the most wonderful solution." I just sipped my water, saying nothing. "You know how hard things have been for Chloe lately," she continued, gesturing toward my sister. "The job market is just so tough, and it's been a real struggle for her to make ends meet." Chloe nodded, putting on her best pout. "It's been awful. Some people just have bad luck, you know?" "And you, Clara," my father chimed in, pouring the champagne. "You're all alone in that big, beautiful house of yours. It's too much space for one person. It must get so lonely." That's when it hit me. A memory from 2 days ago flashed in my mind. I'd come home from work early and saw my mother's Buick pulling away from my curb, Chloe in the passenger seat. I thought it was odd. When I went inside, I noticed a faint scent of my mom's perfume, and a throw pillow on my living room couch was out of place. I'd brushed it off then, but now, it felt like a violation. They had been in my house. Planning. "So," my mother said, her smile widening. "We decided. Chloe is going to move in with you." Chloe clapped her hands together. "Isn't it perfect? We've already started packing my things. I can be in by next weekend. It'll be just like when we were kids. You get some company, and I can finally save up some money without worrying about rent." My father raised his freshly poured glass. "It's the perfect arrangement. Family helps family. That's what we do." They all looked at me, their faces bright with expectation, as if they had just handed me the greatest gift in the world. As if my opinion was a mere formality. They thought it was a done deal. They had used their spare key, walked through my home, and decided my future without even asking. The heat of a deep, quiet fury crawled up my neck. I had spent my entire adult life being the responsible one, the one who never asked for a dime, the one who bought her own house after years of saving every penny. And to them, it was just a resource. Another thing to be handed over to Chloe. My father's voice boomed again, breaking the silence. "Well, what are you waiting for? Let's have a toast. To new beginnings." My mother and Chloe raised their glasses instantly, their eyes sparkling. They all turned to me, glasses held high, waiting. I didn't move. I didn't pick up my glass. I just sat there, looking at each of them, one by one. The smiles began to fade from their faces, replaced by confusion, then a flicker of irritation. "Clara," my father said, his voice losing its cheerful edge. "What's the matter with you? Raise your glass." I slowly, deliberately, set my water glass down on the table. The small click echoed in the sudden silence. I met my father's gaze, then my mother's, and finally, Chloe's. "That's a problem," I said, my voice calmer than I had ever felt in my life. "I sold the house last week." The only sound that followed was the sharp, splintering crash of Chloe's champagne flute shattering on the hardwood floor. For a second, the only thing that moved was a tiny shard of glass, spinning on the polished hardwood. Then, chaos erupted. "What do you mean, you sold it?" my father's voice thundered, his face turning a blotchy red. "You can't do that. You call them up right now and you cancel it. These things have cooling-off periods." "Richard, calm down," my mother said, though her own voice was shrill with panic. She turned on me, her eyes narrowed. "Clara, this is the most impulsive, selfish thing you have ever done. We had a plan. We promised your sister." Chloe was a mess, sobbing into her hands. "You did this to hurt me. You found out I needed a place and you sold your house just to spite me. How could you be so cruel?" The accusations flew at me like stones. Selfish. Impulsive. Cruel. I felt the familiar weight of their labels settling on my shoulders. For a moment, I considered telling them the truth. I opened my mouth to explain, but then I looked at their faces, my father's rage, my mother's disappointment, Chloe's theatrical tears, and I knew it would be pointless. They didn't want reasons. They wanted compliance. Any explanation I gave would just be twisted into more evidence of my selfishness. My voice, when I finally used it, was quiet. "The sale is final. The closing is in 30 days. That night, I drove back to the house that was no longer really mine. The house I had poured my soul into for 9 years. I walked through the quiet rooms, each one a testament to a life they knew nothing about. They saw a big, beautiful house. They didn't see the silent nights I'd spent at the kitchen table, surrounded by spreadsheets and bank statements, a calculator in my hand and a rock of dread in my stomach. It had started last March. A brutal storm had torn through Illinois, and the next morning, I found 3 separate water stains blooming on my ceilings. The diagnosis was grim, the roof was shot. The 30-year shingles had only lasted 22. The bill for the replacement was $11,200. Insurance covered 0. I drained my emergency fund, the one I'd so proudly built, and told myself it was a one-time thing. An investment. But it was just the beginning. 2 months later, I was watering my hydrangeas when I noticed the front lawn was suspiciously soggy. It turned out the main water line from the street to my house had corroded. $8,200 to dig up my entire front yard and replace it. I had to cancel a trip to Arizona to see my old college roommate, a trip I'd been saving for all year. I started picking up freelance marketing work on weekends, writing copy for real estate agents while my friends were at barbecues. The final blow came in June. A sudden cold snap hit, and when I turned on the heat, nothing happened. The furnace was dead. Another $5,000 I simply didn't have. That was the first time I had to pull from my 401k, a move that felt like a physical blow. The retirement fund I had so carefully contributed to since my first real job, now being used to keep my house from freezing. That's when the crying started. It only ever happened after midnight, when the whole neighborhood was dark and silent. I'd sit on my kitchen floor, back against the cabinets, and just let the silent tears run down my face. I was so tired. Tired of the constant worry, tired of the mounting bills, tired of pretending everything was okay. I stopped buying new clothes. When my work pants started slipping off my waist from the weight I'd lost, I just punched new holes in my belt. I told myself it was a temporary situation, a temporary solution. My family saw a successful daughter with a good salary and a nice house. They didn't see the woman who ate ramen for dinner 4 nights a week. They didn't see the panic attacks that woke me up at 3 a.m., my heart hammering against my ribs. They just saw a resource. An asset to be used. As I stood in my living room that night, the sound of their accusations still ringing in my ears, I knew I hadn't sold my house out of spite. I had sold it to survive. The day after the dinner was quiet. Too quiet. I knew it was the calm before the storm. The first wave hit Tuesday morning. My phone rang, and it was my Aunt Patty, my mother's sister. Her voice was dripping with a kind of syrupy disappointment that was worse than yelling. "Clara, honey," she cooed. "Your mother called me. I can't believe what I'm hearing. Selling your beautiful home just to keep your poor sister out? I never thought you could be so cold." I tried to explain, to say it wasn't like that, but it was like talking to a brick wall. She had her story, and she was sticking to it. Family is everything, Clara. You'll learn that one day, perhaps when it's too late. She hung up before I could reply. That was just the first of many. Uncle Robert called next, then my cousin Jennifer. Even my dad's golf buddy, Chuck, a man I'd met maybe twice in my life, left me a voicemail telling me he was deeply disappointed in my lack of family values. Each conversation was the same. They'd all heard the same rehearsed, heartbreaking story of the cruel older sister turning her homeless, struggling sibling out onto the street. My side of the story didn't matter. The truth didn't matter. The real gut punch came that evening. I was scrolling through Facebook, a mindless habit to numb the anxiety, and there it was. A new post from Chloe. There was no picture, just text on a plain background. It read, "The hardest lesson in life is learning who truly has your back when times get tough. Family should be forever, not just when it's convenient." Feeling heartbroken. It was so vague, so perfectly crafted for maximum sympathy. And it was working. 27 comments had already appeared beneath it. "Thinking of you. Stay strong, sweetie. Let me know if you need anything." And then, the comment that made me feel sick to my stomach. It was from my own mother. "We're here for you, sweetheart. Always." I felt a hot flash of rage crawl up my neck. She was publicly siding with Chloe, cementing the narrative for the whole world to see. I was the villain. The cold, uncaring monster. I wanted to scream. I wanted to type out a furious reply, detailing every invoice, every sleepless night, every sacrifice I'd made. But I knew it would be useless. It would just look like I was attacking my heartbroken little sister. They had trapped me. I threw my phone onto the couch and just stared at the wall, my hands trembling. This wasn't just a disagreement anymore. It was a coordinated campaign. They were systematically turning everyone I cared about against me, isolating me until I had no choice but to surrender. I sat there for a long time, the silence of my half-empty house pressing in on me. The phone was quiet for the moment, but I knew it wouldn't last. I felt so utterly alone, cornered by the people who were supposed to love me the most. If you're still listening, please help me by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below. It lets me know you've given me a like, and it tells me that you're with me on this journey. Your support is a bigger encouragement than you know. Just comment the number 1, and then let me tell you what happened next. The next day, they escalated. They came for the one place I thought was safe. They came for my job. It started subtly. I was grabbing coffee in the break room when a colleague, a nice woman from accounting named Diane, gave me a strange look. "Hey Clara," she said, lowering her voice. "This is going to sound weird, but I was leaving for lunch yesterday and I saw someone who looked just like your sister standing out by the visitor parking lot. She was on her phone. Just thought it was odd." A spike of pure ice went through my veins. Chloe had no reason to be anywhere near my office building. "That's strange," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Must have been someone else." But I knew it wasn't. An hour later, I got the email. The subject line was simple: meeting request. It was from my boss, Mr. Henderson. My heart hammered against my ribs. Mr. Henderson was a good boss, fair, professional, but very no-nonsense. He didn't do casual chats. A meeting request like this meant something was serious. I walked to his office, my shoes echoing on the floor. My hands were clammy. I felt like I was walking to the principal's office. I knocked on his door. "Clara, come in," he said, gesturing to the chair in front of his desk. He didn't smile. "Close the door, please." I sat down, my back ramrod straight. "Is everything all right, Mr. Henderson?" He steepled his fingers, his expression unreadable. "Clara, I had a very unusual call this morning. It was from a woman identifying herself as your sister, Chloe." The floor fell out from under me. I couldn't breathe. "She told me she was calling out of deep concern," he continued, his eyes fixed on me. "She said that you've been under enormous stress lately. That you're not sleeping. That you've made some erratic and destructive life decisions recently." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "She used the word unstable, Clara. She suggested that maybe you needed to take some time off, that the pressure of your promotion last year might be too much for you right now." It was a punch to the gut. This was her goal. She wasn't just trying to win a family argument, she was trying to destroy my credibility, to ruin my career, to take away the one thing I had built for myself that she couldn't touch. She was trying to have me declared incompetent. My mind raced. How do I even begin to explain this? How do I defend myself against something so personal, so venomous, without sounding like I'm the crazy one? I took a slow, deep breath, forcing my hands to stop shaking. "Mr. Henderson," I began, my voice tight but steady. "I can assure you that my work performance has not been and will not be affected by anything. I am dealing with a complex and difficult private family matter. My sister and I are having a severe disagreement, and it appears she has unfortunately chosen to involve my professional life in a highly inappropriate way." I looked him straight in the eye. I have never missed a deadline. My projects are on budget. My team is performing well. My work speaks for itself. I understand the position this call has put you in, and I am mortified. But I am not unstable. I am not erratic. I am a professional, and this is a malicious attempt to undermine me." He listened, his expression never changing. The silence in the room was deafening. I had no idea if he believed me. This one phone call, this one act of pure malice from my own sister, could undo years of hard work. She had brought the war to my front door, and I was completely, terrifyingly exposed. I somehow made it through the rest of the workday. I sat at my desk, staring at my computer screen, but the words just swam in front of my eyes. Every time a colleague walked past my cubicle, I felt a fresh wave of shame and paranoia. Do they know? Did they hear something? I felt like I had a giant, invisible sign hanging over my head, unstable. When I finally got back to my car in the parking garage, I just sat there for a long time, the keys in my hand. Then, the dam broke. I put my head on the steering wheel and I sobbed. It wasn't the quiet, midnight crying I had been doing for months. This was a raw, ragged, full-body cry of pure despair. She had found my last nerve, my last sanctuary, and she had shredded it. I felt completely and utterly defeated. After the tears stopped, there was only one person I could call. My fingers trembled as I dialed Brenda's number. She was my oldest friend, the kind of friend who knew my family's entire, twisted history. She picked up on the second ring. "Clara? What's wrong?" she asked immediately. She could always tell. I didn't even say hello. The whole story just came pouring out of me, the dinner, the smear campaign, and the final, horrific call to my boss. I told her everything, my voice cracking. She listened patiently, not interrupting once. When I was finally done, there was a moment of silence on the line. Then she said, with a fury in her voice that was more comforting than any sympathy could be, that little. I am going to kill her. I am going to drive to your parents' house right now. I let out a weak laugh. Please don't. Clara, listen to me, she said, her voice firm. You did nothing wrong. Do you hear me? You protected yourself. That is not a crime. The fact that they are reacting this way proves you did the right thing. They're not mad because you sold the house. They're mad because you took away their control over you. Her words were like a lifeline. Just hearing someone, one single person, validate my reality felt like coming up for air after being held underwater. I know, I whispered. I'm just so tired of fighting. Then stop fighting their way, she said. Fight your way. With facts. With receipts. You have the truth on your side. Don't let them drag you down into their drama. We talked for another hour, and by the time I hung up, the despair had receded, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Brenda was right. I was done being a victim. The next evening, as I was sorting through a stack of old mail, my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Clara, a familiar voice said. It was my Uncle Mark, my father's younger brother. He was a quiet, no-nonsense accountant, the one person in the family who rarely got involved in the drama. Uncle Mark? I said, surprised. I talked to your father, he said, sounding awkward. And your Aunt Patty called me. I've been hearing some things. He paused. It doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound like you. My heart skipped a beat. I'm not calling to take sides, he said quickly. I just want to hear your side of it, Clara. All of it. It wasn't a promise of help. It wasn't a declaration of support. But it was a crack in the wall. It was a glimmer of hope. And right then, it was everything I needed. I called the meeting. Not them. Me. I told my parents I wanted to have a final family discussion before I moved out. I told them to bring Chloe and that I wanted Uncle Mark there as well. There was a surprised silence on the other end of the line, but they agreed. They probably thought I was finally ready to surrender. They were wrong. They arrived at my house a few days later. The living room was filled with boxes, the walls bare where my pictures used to hang. It felt like a neutral territory now, no longer my home, but not yet someone else's. Brenda was already there, sitting quietly on my couch, a calm and steady presence. Her being there threw them off, but I didn't offer any explanation. I didn't let them sit in the living room. I led them straight to the dining room. I had cleared the table completely, except for a single, thick manila folder. And this time, I stood at the head of the table. Please, sit, I said. They sat down, looking confused. My father started to speak, but I held up a hand. Before anyone says anything, I need you all to see something. You've all heard a story about me for the past couple of weeks. Now, you're going to hear the facts. I opened the folder. My hands were perfectly steady. I pulled out the first document and slid it onto the center of the table with a soft thud. This, I said, my voice clear and even, is the invoice for the new roof. $11,200. Paid in full from my savings account in March. I pulled out the next one. This is the invoice for the main water line replacement. $8,200. Paid in April, also from savings. Another document. This is the receipt for the new furnace. $5,000. Paid in June by taking a hardship withdrawal from my 401k. I tapped the paper. That means I paid a penalty, a tax, for accessing my own retirement fund because I had no other choice. I laid out the bank statements next, the pages showing my emergency fund draining from a healthy 5 figures down to 0, then into the red. I showed them the credit card statements with the balances creeping up for the first time in my life. I had every receipt, every invoice, every painful piece of paper that told the story of my last year. My mother stared at the papers, her face pale. My father's blustering anger had vanished, replaced by a stunned silence. Chloe wouldn't look at the table, she just stared at her hands in her lap. Uncle Mark picked up the furnace bill, his brow furrowed. Brenda just sat there, a silent witness to the truth. My financial advisor and my lawyer both advised that selling was the only logical step to protect my assets, I continued, my voice gaining strength. They told me if I had one more major repair, I'd risk foreclosure. I didn't sell my house to spite anyone. I sold my house so I wouldn't lose it. Chloe finally looked up, her eyes flashing with a last spark of defiance. You could have asked for help. We would have helped you. Before I could even answer, Uncle Mark spoke, his quiet voice cutting through the tension. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking directly at my father. Would you have, Richard? He asked. You paid for Chloe's car. You've been supplementing her rent for 2 years. Did you have another $25,000 sitting around to give to Clara? My father's mouth opened and closed. Then Uncle Mark turned to Chloe. His voice was still quiet, but it was sharp as a razor. And you, Chloe? What is your 5-year plan? What steps are you taking to build a career so you don't need to rely on your parents or your sister? Your sister has a promotion, a 401k, a mortgage. What do you have? The question hung in the air, brutal and direct. Chloe's face crumpled. The victim act, her one and only weapon, was useless against Uncle Mark's quiet logic. This is ridiculous, she sputtered, tears streaming down her face. You're all ganging up on me. All I ever did was need a little help. She pushed her chair back violently and stood up. I don't have to listen to this. She grabbed her purse and stormed out of the room, slamming the front door behind her so hard that a bare picture hook fell off the wall and clattered to the floor. In the ringing silence that followed the slam of the door, no one moved. The papers were still spread across the table, an undeniable testament to a reality they had refused to see. My mother just stared at them, her hands clenched in her lap. My father was looking at his brother, his face a mixture of shock and shame. Uncle Mark slowly gathered the invoices into a neat pile. He looked at me, his eyes holding a new respect. You should have told us, Clara, he said, but there was no accusation in his voice, only a quiet regret. Would it have made a difference? I asked, the question genuine. He was silent for a long moment. I don't know, he admitted. He then looked at my father. Richard, Helen. We need to have a long talk about the difference between helping and enabling. He stood up. Brenda, it was good to see you. He gave me a brief, firm nod and walked out, leaving my parents and me alone in the room with the wreckage. My father finally cleared his throat. We should go, he mumbled, not quite looking at me. He helped my mother up from her chair, and she walked past me like a zombie, her eyes glassy and unfocused. She didn't say a word. I followed them to the door and watched them get into their car. My mother stared straight ahead, out the windshield. My father glanced back at my house, at the for sale sign with the sold banner across it, and then he drove away. I closed the door and leaned against it, the adrenaline finally draining out of me, leaving me feeling hollow and exhausted. I had won. I had presented my case, and I had been vindicated. But it didn't feel like a victory. There was no joy, no triumph. It just felt quiet and lonely. The next few weeks were a blur of packing tape and cardboard boxes. I methodically dismantled my life, wrapping my dishes in newspaper, sorting my books, taking down the curtains. The house grew emptier and more echo-filled each day. The silence from my mother and Chloe was absolute. Not a call, not a text. It was as if I had ceased to exist. About a week after the meeting, I got a text from my father. It was short. Just 3 sentences. I'm sorry. We should have listened. Your mother is having a hard time. There was no offer to talk, no real apology, but it was something. A crack of light under a locked door. I typed back a simple, "Thank you," and left it at that. On my last day in the house, after the movers had taken the last of the furniture and all that was left were dust bunnies and memories, I did a final walkthrough. I ran my hand along the walls, remembering the day I'd painted them. I stood in the empty space where my kitchen table used to be, the site of so many sleepless nights of worry. I had saved myself. I had protected my future. But standing there in the echoing emptiness, I had to face the uncomfortable truth of what it had cost me. In order to save myself, I had to shatter the illusion of the family I thought I had. I had won the battle, but I wasn't sure if there was anything left of the home I had been fighting for. 3 months later, I was standing in the middle of my new living room. It was smaller than my old house, a cozy 2-bedroom townhouse downtown, but it was all mine. Sunlight streamed through the big window, and for the first time in over a year, I felt a sense of peace. My mortgage payment was 30% less than what it had been. My savings account, which had been a barren wasteland, was slowly starting to grow again. I was sleeping through the night. The anger had faded, replaced by a quiet contentment. I had enrolled in a beginner's photography class at the local community college, something I'd always wanted to do but never felt I had the time or money for. I was building a new life, one based on my own needs and my own terms, not on the expectations of others. My relationship with my family was polite. Strained. We had a couple of awkward holiday dinners where we talked about the weather and my father's golf game. My mother was civil but distant. Chloe and I barely spoke. It wasn't fixed, and I didn't know if it ever would be. But the toxic dynamic was broken. The endless cycle of her needs and my obligations was over. I had accepted that this might be our new normal. Then, last Tuesday, my phone rang. It was Chloe. I hesitated for a moment before answering, bracing myself. "Hi," she said. Her voice was small, hesitant. Nothing like the confident, entitled tone I was used to. "Hi, Chloe," I said, my voice neutral. There was a long, awkward silence. "So, she started, then stopped. This is going to sound weird." "Okay," I said, waiting. "So, I've been at the new job you told me about," she said, referring to an entry-level opening at a rival company that I had forwarded to her weeks after our confrontation, a simple, no-comment email. "It's okay. It's a lot of work." "That's usually how jobs are," I said, unable to resist. She ignored the jab. "Anyway, I was looking at apartments online. And I was wondering. I mean, you're so good with numbers and stuff. Could you, maybe, show me how to make a budget?" I was floored. In all our years, Chloe had never asked me for advice. She had only ever asked me for things. Money. Favors. A place to live. This was different. This wasn't a demand. It was a request. It was the first time she had ever acknowledged that I had a skill she didn't, the first time she had admitted, in her own way, that she needed to learn how to stand on her own 2 feet. It wasn't a grand apology. It wasn't a tearful reconciliation. But it was a step. A tiny, hesitant, but very real step in a new direction. I took a deep breath. "Yeah, Chloe," I said, a small smile touching my lips for the first time. "I can do that. When are you free?" Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but your support means the world. I'm curious, have you ever had to make a tough decision to protect yourself, even if it meant upsetting your family? Let me know in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more.